Welcome back. I couldn't be more pleased to say we're joined by a personal friend, a man I've come to admire tremendously for his courage and his integrity and his leadership in one of the most important battle spaces in what I call the war for the free world, namely the fight for, as he calls it, the soul of Islam. His name is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, a medical doctor. He is, among other things, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy based in Phoenix, Arizona. He's also a co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement. He has served his country in the uniform of the United States Navy, rising to the rank of a lieutenant commander. And he has been the vice chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. I'm very proud to say he is a senior fellow of our Center for Security Policy, as well as the author of a book, I mentioned his name a moment ago, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, An American Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. We're always delighted to have a chance to visit with him. Dr. Jasser, thank you for joining us here at Securing America. Good to be with you.
It's great to be with you, Frank. Thanks for having me.
I'd like you to just give us a little bit of background on yourself beyond what I've said in terms of this battle for the soul of Islam. What has been your experience of it here in the United States? And how does that really speak to the larger challenge that we're facing of religious freedom, not just here, but elsewhere around the world?
Well, I'm the son of Syrian immigrants that escaped persecution in Syria under the Ba'athist regime, and I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin and was taught that I could practice my faith more freely and closer to God in Wisconsin in this Christian majority country than I could in any Muslim majority country. Why? Because we have a reform-minded, more unique interpretation of our faith than the Islamic establishment. Then I go to the university, join the Navy, and realize that the Islamic establishment running our mosques, running most of the Islamic institutions are really Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups, part of a global operation that hand in glove with Islamic regimes from Iran to Pakistan to Qatar, Turkey. And they've been funding a huge operation to try to control Western influence in their country. And when I was fortunate enough to be appointed by Senator McConnell to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, at the meetings with the State Department in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Indonesia, and elsewhere, I realized that if I hadn't been there to retranslate and correctly translate meetings that were about putting America on the defense rather than us trying to protect minorities, protect dissidents and others, those countries ended up fearing me and fearing the fact that there was a Muslim who knew their hymnals, if you will, and understood what they were trying to do to run their theocracies. It would have been a whole different program, and that's why I'm concerned about Mr. Hussein's appointment.
We're going to talk about Rashad Hussein in just a moment, but just to finish up on this topic, you mentioned that the Muslim Brotherhood's agenda is trying to maintain control of the Muslims around the world, but isn't it also the case that it's really pursuing under this Islamic doctrine of Sharia the domination of everybody else as well by stealthy jihadist techniques, if not by violent ones?
Yeah, whether you're talking about things as radical as ISIS or Hamas or Al-Qaeda, or as perceptibly, supposedly democratic, like the Turkish now Islamic Republic under Erdogan. So whether these governments operate under supposedly parliaments and democracy, if their guidance is Sharia, the instrument is theocratic, it will not allow anyone who's not Muslim to have any significant freedoms but from the king, but from the ruler and the Islamists running the show. So they mix state identity with the jihad. They mix state identity with the instrument of law. And the Muslim Brotherhood proved what they were when they ran Egypt. And they've proven what they do in every mosque across the country where the Islamists who run the show have no women on their board. They have no reform-minded Muslims on their board. And then when they get involved in our State Department, in our Pentagon, they try to suppress education about other interpretations of Islam that would threaten their theocratic mindset of controlling what it is to be Muslim.
And what it is to be Muslim according to their theocratic program, as you call it, and what it means to be anything other than Muslim, according to that program, is in very stark contrast to the Constitution of the United States and the freedoms that it guarantees, is it not? And if so, talk a little bit about what someone who is imbued with this, well, I call it Sharia supremacism, like I think this fellow Rashad Hussein, who President Biden has now nominated to become, amazingly, the ambassador at large for international religious freedom, the top diplomat in our country charged with promoting a form of religious freedom that seems very much antithetical to the Sharia doctrine and the Brotherhood's teachings as well, no?
Yeah, and to me, listen, he's free to join whatever he wants to, but if he's going to be appointed as an ambassador to international religious freedom, having served on that commission, a commission in which that ambassador sat as an observer, our charge was to see if the State Department actually did what it was supposed to be doing, which is defending religious freedom and the rights of minorities and dissidents and others. And I can't tell you how many times we corrected the State Department. Our list of countries of concern wasn't always in line with what the State Department had. And Rashad Hussein, when he was the OIC envoy, was sat on his hands. He has no track record at all in the years under Obama in which he served as that envoy, ever challenging the regimes of Saudi Arabia or Iran or Turkey or otherwise, and actually simply giving them oxygen. And they loved him. So a Muslim, fine, if you want to appoint a Muslim, which is actually, I think, important to appoint an anti-Islamist Muslim, because that position should be somebody who's feared by those regimes, who's feared by the Muslim Brotherhood. And there's no evidence anywhere that the Khomeinists in Iran or the Brotherhood would anything but love Rashad Hussein, which should tell every senator that that's not someone who's going to be advancing the values of a constitutional system like the American system. Yeah. When I testified to Congress a few times, I told them, I said, we need an Islam to go through what America went through in its revolution against theocracy for separation of church and state, and we need to separate mosque and state. Rashad Hussein, when he was envoy during the Arab awakening, never called for such a separation, and therefore he is the wrong person to be the ambassador for religious freedom.
Yeah. To this point, Zuhdi, as you were describing your personal firsthand experience with him, when he was the envoy for Barack Obama to this organization called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, some call it a kind of caliphate because it's got 57 Muslim majority nations that are endlessly promoting Sharia and seeking, as we know, to try to impose it worldwide. If that track record doesn't tell you everything you need to know about a guy who seems to be very ill-suited to promoting religious freedom, to promoting the rights of minorities who are being persecuted in many of those countries terribly. By one estimate, Open Doors USA, 340 million Christians are being heavily persecuted by predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly by these Sharia supremacist Muslims. So this would seem to be just wrong on so many different levels. We have been asking questions, a group I head up called Save the Persecuted Christians, of Mr. Hussein to just establish how does he square his convictions about the supremacy of Islam with our Constitution, which says that's not right. Everybody has a right to enjoy their freedoms. And Zuhdi, you've made a very important statement from the Muslim Reform Movement, which you co-founded. Talk a little bit about your statement and the bottom line as far as members of the Senate should be concerned, as you see it.
Our reform movement is basically a coalition of over 15 organizations of Muslims that are startup groups, many of us, that are fighting the establishment, the petro-Islamic establishment, or the Brotherhood sympathizers that want to put the West on the defense, that want to take an offense of advancing the land of Islam against what they perceive as the land of war and that neo-caliphate, which is the OIC. And we basically said, listen, we're all for having a Muslim appointed, but it is insulting to us to say that the bench of Muslims available to put into a position of such import that's going to protect minorities, that's going to stand for the rights of dissidents. How about Sunni dissidents in majorities that are dissidents against the theocracy? Rashad Hussein has none of the pedigree, none of the ideologies necessary to do that. And in actuality, we find it insulting as Muslims because it sends a message to the world that it's the Islamist sympathizers that'll speak for American Muslims rather than reformers who are against the programs of Iran's end of times eschatology, of them talking about the 12th Imam and their Islamic Republic, or the Pakistani Islamic Republic and their Sharia state that tortures women and minorities, or the Turkish programs against professors that speak up against political Islam and others. All over the world, there's a huge opportunity here. And if any senator thinks that appointing Rashad Hussein is going to help those dissidents, help minorities, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, they are sadly mistaken, and it's a major mistake to appoint him.
I appreciate so much your clarity on this point and the authority you bring to this issue, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, as a man who has actually walked the walk as well as talked it about religious liberty. Thank you for your leadership, both in the Muslim reform movement and in this vital issue. Rashad Hussein, I think, is unfit for this important position, both here and abroad. More on this anon. Right after this.
Real America's Voice presents Water Cooler with David Brody.
If you're going to look into January 6th, I mean, there's a broader issue here, too, about some violence going on.
Don't miss Water Cooler, weekdays at 3 p.m. Eastern.